Joining me right now is Potomac Wealth Advisors founder and president Mark Avallone. Mark, your reaction this morning to the Home Depot quarter?
Well, the Home Depot quarter had a lot of the similar stories that we've been hearing for the past few months, that consumers had been on a binge during COVID to refurbish their homes, and that is slowing just a little bit. He also noted that people aren't moving as much, and those create bigger tickets. And what we have left are homeowners, in this case for Home Depot, embarking on smaller projects. They're lower margins. There's enough activity to keep the report decent. It's reflective of the economy, which is muddling along. But there isn't that big spend boom by consumers who are hurt by higher rates, an uncertain economy, and they had already spent down a lot of that COVID savings. So it's a lot of that murky middle, choppy economic data that I expect to continue into the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Home Depot quarter at first glance looked like a good number because it was a beat on both revenue and earnings. But when the company started talking about the guidance and in the press release talking about taking its guidance down up to 9% versus a 7% guidance the last quarter, that's when the stock turned around. That's what I want to get your take on, the guidance for 2024. What kind of an economic backdrop are you expecting into year end and next year?
Well, yeah, and they've been missing top-line revenue numbers all year, so then taking them down and beating a weaker earnings estimate, all of that together, I could understand why there's some negative sentiment. Look, interest rates have soared in the past year and a half, and the impact and the lags are known, that the lags will hit, and no one knows exactly when. Jerome Powell says as much, but we will expect that going into the new year, the consumer is going to be facing higher rates, corporations refinancing debt. CFOs are very concerned about debt that's maturing. They've been paying interest at maybe 2–3%, going to be in the 5–6% range. And we're starting to see weakness from consumers and credit card debt piling up, and you're going to see it in subprime auto loans as well. So Home Depot is wise to guide down, because when people are struggling or have questions, they're not going to embark on these big projects and spend on discretionary items. We're a consumer spending economy, and when that slows, look for some economic headwinds.
Yeah, and part of the headwinds has to do with 11 rate hikes by the Federal Reserve. Let's take a look at the 10-year this morning ahead of the October CPI number coming out this morning in two hours' time. The 10-year sitting at 4.614%. Mark, down 1.8 basis points today. We'll see what happens after the CPI number. The expectations call for an increase of 0.1% year of a 0.1% month over month and 3.3% year over year for the CPI. Mark, I know that gasoline was down in the month of October, so maybe that's a good portion of this number, but other things like food and shelter remain elevated.
They do, and we're still above the Fed's target of 2%, and the current numbers aren't going to reflect a lot of the recent wage gains that we saw. We saw wage gains in Hollywood. We saw it at UPS. We see them in healthcare. There were strikes across the country. And, of course, we all know with the UAW. And I think that to ignore the ultimate impact and how that spreads when higher wages start working their way into the prices of items, Ford already said they may have to raise prices of a car by $1,000. There's a lag effect there. So I will acknowledge that inflation has been declining. 3.3 is a lot better than where we were, but it's still north of the Fed's 2% target, and it doesn't reflect wage gains that are very recent, and I'm talking the past few months. So yeah, I'm still hesitant to think it's a straight line down, and I think the Fed is a long way away from reducing rates. At best, we can hope for a steadier rate chart.